if you have the breadth of medical knowledge and you have inherently got good writing skills, then that's all you need. So you have the advertising side, you have the continued education, and you have the journalism or the editorial. And they kind of have different salaries. Advertising, you tend to earn a lot more. Copywriting is a very in demand skill set. I would really suggest putting all of your focus on the writing samples themselves and the marketing of yourself as a person or as a company, depending on if you're full time or freelance. That's really the value that's coming through. Let's jump into the Q&A portion, which will be the majority of this session. So if we start with roles and responsibilities. So, if you have any questions about roles and responsibilities of a medical writer, whether it's full time, freelance, we'll keep within that category for now. So, if you can type those into the chat, then Dustin will kind of feed them to me, and we'll just spend 5 minutes or so on those, and then we'll move on. So, roles and responsibilities. Okay, Dustin, do you want to feed me one?
Yeah, so looks like one question that kind of is pervasive throughout all of them is from Priya. The first question that asks is what does a medical writer do generally? So, and a lot of questions are corollaries of that, like what kind of papers do they write? What kind of medical writing niches are there? And what
Okay.
does a typical day look like?
Okay, typical day. Okay, so one thing I'd like to clarify, one thing that I wasn't sure about when I entered the industry was the different nuances of writing within healthcare. So I came from a healthcare background. I had a strong medical education, which was quite broad. It covered a lot of therapeutic areas, and I'd actually worked in a clinical setting. I'd worked with patients. I'd actually done some even education sessions with patients, but I didn't realize going in what the different kind of categories of writing were within healthcare. It's actually very broad. And so there are certain areas that you might like and other areas that you might not like. So what I've really narrowed it down to is three main areas. And our agency actually works across all three of them. Usually they'll kind of specialize in one or the other, but we kind of keep things broad. So one of the areas is more on the advertising side. So you go into advertising and you become a copywriter, and you're working on pharmaceutical brands or health related brands, and you're actually writing copy, which is to promote the product or sell a product or a service within healthcare. So that's a very creative and a tactical sort of writing. There isn't really that much writing actually part of your job. It's more coming up with the ideas of how can we creatively um, there's an underlying strategy behind the messaging, and then there's certain restrictions that you have to work within in the advertising industry. So it's a very specific type of skill set. It doesn't require much writing. It's not like read this paper and then translate it into something that people can understand. It's actually, it's advertising. So I've worked in that field. I do some work in that area, and I personally really love it. Um, I guess we can get into more of that later. I don't want to kind of give you too much information, but that's one of the categories. Another one is continued education. So that might be for patients or for healthcare professionals. And so that's a really big category. And that really is more about being able to read scientific literature, understand what is happening, understand the data, understand the key takeaways from that research, and convert it into writing materials that are educational for patients or healthcare professionals. So it could look like a webinar. For example, you could write a script for a slide deck for a presentation, or it could be an article for a journal, a scientific journal, or it could be a script for a video series. Training some nurses or something like that. So it's educational in nature. And then I would say the third area of medical writing or writing in the healthcare space is more editorial. It's more on the journalism side. So you might work for a digital media type organization or a newspaper, um, or a company like a medical devices company, for example. They have a blog, they have a mailing list, they have an audience of people that they write to try to generate leads for their business or to try to raise awareness of their brand. So it's a very kind of casual style of writing. It involves interviewing people, interviewing patients, interviewing healthcare professionals, speaking to patient advocate groups, and kind of storytelling around a particular therapeutic area, but using quotes. And it's pretty informal. It's a different skill set because it involves a lot of networking, a lot of talking to people, another kind of type of creativity, but from a storytelling standpoint. So, depending on which of those three areas you work in, your day-to-day task could look very different. So I'll stop there because I want to make sure we have time to answer other questions. Dustin, is there any other question in regards to roles and responsibilities that kind of encompasses quite a few people's interests?
Uh, yeah, I guess regarding roles and responsibilities, I guess a lot of the questions are asking what kind of papers do they write? Do medical writers write? What kind of articles? What kind of specific kind of writing do they do?
Yeah, that's a good one. It really varies a lot. You can choose to specialize in a particular type of deliverable if you want. You could also choose to specialize in a particular therapeutic area and then produce different types of materials. It could be, for example, a white paper that summarizes a lot of literature that has been published within a certain time frame on a particular therapeutic there'll be a hypothesis that's being asked, and then they'll kind of compile everything, and it will be like a summary document type of thing. It could also be more like sales materials if they're used internally for a medical devices company, for example. Everyone who works at that company needs to understand how to communicate the value of that product or that service. There are so many. It could be, like I said, a slide deck for a presentation that is going to be given to, 100 physicians. It really varies quite a lot. If it's more patient focused, it could be brochures, it could be websites, it could be handouts or even emails. Any time when you're communicating medical information. I think that we should move on to one of the other categories so that we have plenty of time for the main, the areas you really want to focus on. I know that earning potential was one of the sections. Should we maybe get into that now? So if you have any questions around earning potential in the medical writing industry, then now's your time to type your questions into the chat and we will discuss those. Try to be as specific as possible so that I can, if there's a particular situation that you're in or something that you're trying to negotiate, and whether it's full-time salary or freelance contract. Okay, Dustin, is there
Uh,
anything coming through?
yeah, a lot of questions are mostly have to do with freelance writing and how does a freelance medical writer, how do you set your rates and how do you decide how you want to get paid?
Yeah, great question. When I first started as a freelancer, I had never worked full time as a medical writer or any kind of health writer. I pretty much was always independent. And so I think if you're the type of person that wants to work for yourself and have that level of freedom and control over what you do and how much you charge, then really it's almost whatever you choose it to be. I asked around a lot. I spoke to a lot of other freelance writers. When I was in-house at an agency for my first ever contract, I spoke to a lot of the freelancers, asked them what their rates were. I realized there was a huge range from like 35, 45 Canadian dollars an hour up to 250. And I found it difficult at first to know where to position myself because, sales is a skill and it's something that we often coach our clients on, how to have those kinds of conversations, the negotiations, how to know the value of the work that you're providing. Um, it really depends on where you're starting off. Do you have writing experience? Do you feel confident that you can deliver what the client is asking you for? Does the client have a budget that you need to keep within? Are you giving an hourly rate? Are you giving a daily rate? Are you giving a weekly rate? It fluctuates a lot. And I would say that um, a good starting point is to ask around other writers who are with a similar level of experience to yourself, or in a similar position. You'd be surprised how many people are willing to share those kinds of figures. Personally, I started off at 100 Canadian an hour with my first ever freelancing client. It was quite terrifying because I didn't really know how they were going to receive that, but um, it was fine. A lot of the time people don't even ask for your rate until after you've completed the work, you send an invoice. So, that's one of the things that we focus on in coaching, because it can be pretty tricky, especially if you've only worked a 9 to 5 and then you suddenly have to decide what to charge yourself. Yeah. Dustin, are there any other questions that kind of encompass what people are asking?
Yeah, I guess the only other question that would apply to that is kind of the other side is if you're either part-time or full-time employed as a medical writer, what kind of rates would you have there? Or what
Yeah,
could you
yeah,
expect?
yeah. So I would say, I mentioned the three areas at the beginning. So you have the advertising side, you have the continued education, and you have the journalism or the editorial. And they kind of have different salaries. Advertising, you tend to earn a lot more. Copywriting is a very in demand skill set. Um, in terms of salary, you could definitely be getting six figures if you have a more senior type position. um I would say, maybe, I think you would come in at around 60,000 as a Canadian, as a more junior. But I actually, just yesterday, I was offered a full-time position that was 182,000 Canadian, and I said no because I have my agency. I'm doing my own thing now, and I, I've seen salaries go up as high as 200. Um, so there's again, a broad scope there. You kind of have to really hone in your negotiation skills, find out what the budget is of the person who's hiring you, talk to other people that work there to see what they're being paid. Not everyone will tell you, but some people will. Um, and I would say, there's also a lot to be made in the medical writing, the more clinical side of things as well, especially in the regulatory um, side of things. I personally don't work in regulatory, but anything involving bringing new drugs to market, those kinds of things, there's a lot of money to be made there. So the salaries might be a bit higher, um, but you know again, it's kind of, what do you want? What are you willing to, what feels good to you? How good are you at standing by the value that you're bringing to the company? um Hopefully that answers the question. um I think we should move now into the other area. I forget what it was now. Oh, I think the biggest category was credentials, experience, qualifications. What was
Yeah,
the other one? What was the fourth one?
the last one was the full-time versus contract work, which you had just talked about.
Yeah, I guess if anyone has any specific questions about, which one to go for, is it better to go for full time? Is it better to go for contract? Like, do do you need any guidance around that? How to make that decision? Um, Put those questions in. Um, and then, Dustin, if you can kind of amalgamate. Otherwise, I can kind of talk generally around that.
Yeah, so there were a lot of questions earlier about where can you find work, basically. Where can you find these contracts if you're a freelancer, and where can you find the jobs if you're not a freelancer?
Mm. Well, that's two different questions, so I'll address them individually. Um, if you are full time, if you're looking for full time, then if you want to be more on the promotional side, you would work for an advertising agency that has a health division. Um, and that's who you would approach. They would be hiring for copywriters, junior copywriters, mid-level copywriters, wherever you um, are. And I would say as well, if you've been in the medical industry for a long time, maybe you worked in research or you worked full time as a clinician, or you have your own practice and you see patients a lot. If you've got 10, 15 years of experience being in healthcare, but you haven't been a medical writer, you can go in at a senior level. There's no need for you to start as junior and work your way up. I personally went in at senior level. It's a bit of a steep learning curve at first, but you will pick it up. It's pretty straightforward. You're really in an advertising setting, having the healthcare knowledge is a huge asset, and it's something that not many people have. Typically what happens is people study advertising, they just find themselves in a healthcare division with pharma clients, and they have to learn the health side of things, and they can find it very difficult in the briefs to understand the mechanism of action of the product, how the product works, all those kinds of things. So if you know that, you're at a huge, you're already way ahead of them. um, so don't undersell yourself. If you want to work more in continued education, then you might want to work for like an institution that focuses on that, so they produce online courses or online materials, or maybe work for like uh um, what do you call them, like an association where healthcare professionals, they pay a subscription, and then there's continued education that's provided to them through that association. So they often make a lot of materials in house. um, so I think, the position might be called medical writer, it might be health writer, it might be online educator, it could be even instructional designer. That's another phrase that they use. Um, if it is more on the journalism side, then you might want to work for a newspaper or a digital health type of organization where they have a growing audience and they need a lot of content, or other people come to them wanting to promote what they do and they write for them. So that's full time. And then LinkedIn is probably the best place to go if you're looking for full-time positions. There are recruiters that specialize in health related positions, medical writing especially. I see them all the time. Make sure you turn on that feature so that they can find you and just chat to them, and they're trying to fill those positions all the time. um, and if you want to go into the regulatory side of things, that's a whole thing in itself. So, I would suggest talking to other people in that area, seeing how they got started. Maybe they had connections through their professors that they worked with in research. And if it's freelance, um, it's a whole different ball game. It's a different lifestyle. It's a different career entirely, to be honest. I've only really been a freelancer myself, although I've had full-time contracts for a few weeks at a time. So I've seen what it's like to be full-time, and I personally don't like it. Um, it requires you to be very entrepreneurial. It really is like any other business. You have to be business minded. You do not focus on the writing. You have to love business. You have to love the process of networking, talking to people, meeting with potential clients, talking about what you do. You really have to have a lot of guts to, position yourself strongly and to convince them that you can deliver what they need. Often people who freelance, they've already worked full time for 10, 15 years, and then they just know everything. And then freelance is kind of a natural next step for them because they have the confidence, they have the track record, they have examples of work they can show. If you're going in and you don't have that, then you need to focus heavily on your own marketing as a brand. You and your company is a brand, and you need to figure out how to position yourself, what to specialize in, how you're going to stand out above everyone else who's doing that exact same thing. And that's really what we specialize in at Prospology, because that's what I've done myself. I've built my brand from nothing. And now we have a 6-figure company. We have a whole load of contractors that work for us. We're constantly expanding, but we've done that through knowing the business side of things, learning the negotiation skills, the marketing skills, how to have those conversations. And really, you spend the vast majority of your time running the business and not doing the actual writing. It's a very different type of lifestyle. So if you don't like that, then I would not suggest attempting it unless, like I said, you've already worked full time for a while and you just feel as though maybe you there's not as much pressure to make as much money, or you have already got connections. But if you are entrepreneurial and you hate working for somebody else, like me, then it's an amazing opportunity. And if you have a coach or you have someone supporting you on the business side of things, maybe you have studied business, or you know someone who has, or you work with a marketing professional or something, then it's pretty straightforward. It takes a lot of guts and hard work, but it's definitely doable. You can earn a lot more. There's definitely a lot more earning potential as a freelancer, but it's obviously less predictable, and the workload does fluctuate. You need to be able to handle that, manage your cash flow, accounting. You have to wear many different hats. It's a completely different career, in my opinion. Okay, so let's move on to the main topic that you wanted to ask about, which is I've forgotten now. Remind me.
Experience and
Experience. Yeah,
qualification.
yeah, yeah. Qualifications, experience. Okay. So please type in the chat if you have any particular questions
Mm.
about, getting into the industry, what you need to learn, what credentials you might need to have, those kinds of things.
Yeah, there's been a lot already, so I imagine it's gonna yeah, so a lot of it is uh, what kind of experience do you need? Do you need certifications? Do you need school? Um, what kind of schooling do you need? Is it required to have a medical background?
Mm-hmm.
Um, do you need like a medical degree, or do you need to be a physician?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay. So when I first discovered medical writing as a career option, even health writing in general, um, health communications is what I first heard about. And I was like, oh, what is that? That sounds interesting. I started talking to people who worked in health communications. I did I did about 15 informational interviews over a few weeks, and I asked them every single question I had um, about what their job was like, how much they earned, what they liked about it. And that's kind of one of the things that we teach at Prospology as well. You can get so much information if you know how to effectively conduct those kinds of informational interviews. Um, so, where was I going with that? Um, oh yeah, credentials. So I was being told repeatedly by everyone that I spoke to that you needed to have a PhD to become a medical writer. And there were companies that I was applying to that wouldn't even consider me because I didn't have a PhD. They put that as a requirement in the job listing, and if you didn't have it, they would just disregard your resume. um, and I found that very disheartening, and for a while I stopped pursuing it because I didn't think, I knew I wasn't the kind of person to want to spend that many years doing something just for the purposes of getting a job that I wanted. So I kind of gave up. But the more I talked to people, the more I realized actually that's not the case. There are a lot of companies that do hire without a PhD or without a master's or without even a writing certificate or evidence of having studied writing or English or anything around that, even copywriting. Um, a lot of people, because they have a healthcare background or they have an education background, like they used to teach or they used to um, even tutor, or they did research in a particular area of medicine, or they worked with patients one on one. That really is just as strong, if not a lot stronger than any kind of certification that you could get. Um, Really, when somebody is hiring you to be a medical writer or a copywriter or any kind of writer in health, is they want to know that you can write. They want to see examples of your writing. That's all they care about. They want to know, if I give you a project and this client is expecting this from us, can you deliver it? And is it going to be to a high standard? Are we going to have to hold your hand and teach you? Or are you just going to get it? You're going to pick it up. You're going to run with it. Um, if I've learned anything through doing all of this on my own without any formal education, it's that you can learn on the job. You really can. You can ask for examples of projects that have been done before. You can ask to see a layout of something, like what will it look like when it's finished. You can ask questions. You can ask about the tone, about the audience, about the length, about the structure, all of those things, and through that you can produce it. um, if you have the breadth of medical knowledge and you have inherently got good writing skills, then that's all you need. I would say, on the flip side, if you are coming into this without a medical background or an understanding of medicine, um, that might be more valuable to study rather than the writing itself, because I would really suggest putting all of your focus on the writing samples themselves and the marketing of yourself as a person or as a company, depending on if you're full time or freelance. That's really the value that's coming through. Um, and so that's what we focus on at Prospology, and that's what we help people do. Any other questions around that, Dustin? What's been coming in?
Yeah, it seems like there's been a lot of portfolio questions. Like, how do you build your writing samples, your resume, your portfolio, and how do you
Mm.
brand it in a way to get the employers to look at them?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that was the thing that I was most worried about when I was first starting, because when I worked at an ad agency for just a few weeks, everyone told me, you're going to fail. You're going to fail because you're not going to have a portfolio. No one's going to consider you. No one's going to take you seriously. How is anyone going to know what you're capable of? And you need to work for 10, 15 years to build up that portfolio in order for anyone to take you seriously. And I wasn't put off by that, but I was a bit concerned. I'm not the kind of person that gives up easily. So I decided, well, there must be a way for me to create that myself. I don't need to get that from a full-time position. Um, and even getting that first contract in the first place was through samples that I had put together. Um, one of the things we do often at Prospology is we look at the person as a whole. We look at what their strengths are in the eyes of the employer or the client. So, what writing have you done? Did you work for a newspaper for a while as a volunteer? Do you have a blog? Did you write things for patients in your clinic? Have you written manuscripts. You know, that there's a really wide range of types of writing that can be shown to be directly applicable to what the employer needs. And so it's learning how to pull together what you've done, knowing what's valuable, what's not valuable, and how to communicate that to the person that's going to be paying you. And so really, you know, that is the only real limiting factor between not having work and having work. It's how well can you show them that you know how to do the work that will be required. So, you know, if you don't have anything, you can create them. You can, for example, you know, in an ad agency, you typically work with an art director, and you come up with concepts of how to um, show the like how to convince people to be interested in the product visually and creatively with catchy headlines and things. So, you know, you could just find an art director and ask them, you know, hey, can we just spend a couple of hours together? You know, give me like a generic drug that we might work with. Talk me through like what would a typical project look like. Let's come up with some ideas. Let's create something. Make a portfolio with like a fake product, and you know, have something to showcase, and then present it to the person who's interviewing you or the client and show them, you know, I've done that kind of work. If it's more of a journalistic piece, the same thing goes. You know, you could have your own blog and you can write an article or several articles that have the exact same tone, format, structure, language, types of topics that the client has, and then show it to them. And immediately they know that you're going to be able to do the work that they're asking you to do. So, you know, don't limit yourself. There are many ways that you can pull it together. And that's one of the things we help people with individually, because it honestly looks completely different to every person that we work with. Okay, one or two more questions around the theme of I keep losing my train of thought. I'm like looking at Dustin and I'm like, there's all these people around me. Um, yeah, what else am I missing? What's coming through?
Uh, yeah, it looks like Dr. Samia has, or Saima has asked, do you have any like examples of some of your portfolio? I don't know if you have it on hand on your computer, but maybe that might help a lot of people with how their portfolio should look, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to look different depending on who you're presenting it to. I think one of the downfalls that people often have is they try to be too broad in what their samples are. They throw everything in there that they think is relevant, instead of having like a select handful, you know, four or even two or three really strong pieces that are exactly the type of material that you're going to be doing for that client or for that employer. So my portfolio looks different every time I'm pitching to somebody. Um, you know, sometimes I have like a PowerPoint deck where I have some screenshots of some of the video interviews that I've conducted. And you know, once I was pitching to work on a nutrition client at an ad agency, and I had just done interviews with people that had been working in nutrition for 20-30 years, and I did all these video like podcast interviews, so I put evidence of that in there. I put you know, anything that I had written that was in the nutrition space, I put in there, and I just screenshotted it and I put it in, and I put a headline, or I put, you know, a couple of bullet points about what it was with a link to the website that it was on or something. And doing it that way is it allows you to be a bit more creative with it. You know, have a bit of creative flair in there. you know, if you want to get into more the journalism side, you would just have a blog or something on a website, or you might use a service that is dedicated towards building a portfolio. There are plenty of those that exist where the framework is already there. You're just putting the content in. You're writing your bio, you're writing your contact information. You put some samples in. It kind of does it for you, and there's even some password protected versions of those, which is great because a lot of times you can't share the things that you've done. That's a really big challenge in the industry. Um, you know, I always try to meet in person if I'm going to, if possible. I did this before COVID. I would bring physical samples of my writing and show it to them, print out some things, open it on my computer, let them read, let them look. So it really depends on who you're trying to impress, and you need to be laser focused, and you need to be prepared to kind of recreate it almost, or have different versions depending on who you're showing. I'll take one more question, because I want to also tell you guys about what we do, and give you a chance to follow up with myself afterwards if you have any remaining questions that you didn't get to ask. What else do we have in the chat, Dustin?
Yeah, there's one question. So for a lot of people that they're saying they're starting to get into medical writing, or what kinds of courses or materials can they look at to kind of teach you the basics, or like what if you're like a complete beginner, like where exactly can you get started?
Um, where can you get started? I mean, you get started by writing things, honestly. You you have to kind of treat it as though you've been given an assignment, and that you've been asked to, take this paper that has just been published, and create an infographic from that. Have something that has um some structure, some categories, some visuals, bit of text, and it it takes like a complicated concept, and it breaks it down into something that the average person could understand. If that's the kind of work that you want to be doing, then that's the kind of sample that you want to have. And so really, it's a great opportunity if you haven't written in a professional setting yet to try it out, try different types of writing, and then show it to people who are in the industry, who can tell you, is it good, is it what somebody might expect, is a standard high enough, can they give you any feedback? And I think there can be internships for certain types of role. um, you might want to get started. Honestly, I'm the kind of person that just jumps in, and that's often what we do with our clients, is like, why are you waiting around? Why are you kind of settling for a job that you don't really get much out of, that you're not really growing with, when you could be making money, you could be learning through the projects? I think there's an amazing opportunity to do that. And so I think people kind of hold themselves back because they don't have the belief in themselves, or the confidence, or they don't fully understand the value that they bring. And that's kind of what we specialize in helping people do.